The physical body is not the problem. The problem is the vital force. And so, detoxing the toxins from your liver is not going to help your vital force as far as he's concerned. Hey guys, it's Brittany. So we're going over Aphorism 11 today. In Aphorism 11, he brings up a couple of really important points about what the vital force is and how we know it exists and what disease is. So let's read it first. When a person falls ill, it is only the spiritual self-acting automatic vital force everywhere present in his organism that is primarily deranged by the dynamic influence upon it of a morbific agent inimical to life. It is only the vital force, deranged to such an abnormal state that it can furnish the organism with its disagreeable sensations and incline it to the irregular processes which we call disease. For, as a power invisible in itself and only cognizable by its effects on the organism, its morbid derangement only makes itself known by the manifestation of disease in the sensations and functions of those parts of the organism exposed to the senses of the observer and physician, that is, by morbid symptoms, and in no other way can it make itself known. So basically, he has, as far as I'm concerned, has two major points in this aphorism. First, that when you become ill, it is not your physical body that becomes ill, it is the vital force. And this is vitally important, because this, I believe, is why something like a detox, he would say, is never going to work, why bloodletting would never work to him. It's because the physical body is not the problem. The problem is the vital force. And so, detoxing the toxins from your liver is not going to help your vital force as far as he's concerned. Because that's not where the disease is. The disease is in the vital force. It's like separate from your body. And what creates the symptoms in your body is the vital force, not the disease. It's the disease affects your vital force, and the vital force affects your body. So then just treating your body is not going to help you at all because the vital force is still diseased, even if you get rid of the physical manifestations of disease. Okay, so then the second major point is that the only way we can know the vital force exists is also by the effects that it gives off. So essentially, if you're in balance, you can know the effects of the vital force because it's the thing keeping you in balance. But also, if you are out of balance, then it is the thing that puts you out of balance, and that's how you know the vital force is there. So you cannot know disease itself because you can't see it, right? You can see its effects, but you can't see disease. And same with the vital force. You cannot see the vital force. You only know of it by its effects. You're sort of approximating this thing you cannot see, which takes us into his footnote. So in the footnote, he starts to go into what a dynamic influence is. And I won't read the whole footnote because it's ridiculously long. But basically, he goes over a couple examples of what he means by dynamic influence. So he talks about the moon and the tides, right? The tides change based on the moon, but we cannot see a mechanical reason why. There's no string attaching the ocean to the moon, right? Then there's magnets and metals. You can't see magnetism, even though you can absolutely see the effect of a magnet on metal. Then there's infection. Now this one is a little bit controversial because it goes somewhat against other things he's written before. So he talks about infection as a dynamic effect of the sick-making influences upon a healthy man. For example, a child with smallpox or measles communicates to a near, untouched, healthy child in an invisible manner or dynamically. The smallpox or measles, that is, infects it at a distance without anything material from the infected child going to the one who's going to be infected. So this one is a little bit controversial because in the past, in particular on an essay on cholera, he talks about infection as being the transmission of animalcules, which we can see as a precursor to our modern germ theory in the sense that you get these bacteria or viruses that are transmitted from one person to the other. Now, let's just put that aside for a second. So the other examples of dynamic influence is if you look at something gross, it makes you nauseous. If you raise your arm, or homeopathic remedies, right? Like the more we dilute them, the better they seem to work, which is so crazy, right? Back to the bit of controversy. The reason this is slightly controversial is because this aphorism this footnote is new to the 6th edition of the Organon. It doesn't appear in others. And I think there's something about handwriting. I haven't gone into this too much in my detail in myself, but with the 6th edition, because it was a handwritten copy that was, not published for many decades after his death, there are sometimes questions about whether or not everything was done in his handwriting, or whether or not maybe Melanie or someone else added some stuff in. And so we don't always know that everything is coming from Hahnemann. But we don't need to get into that too much today. But I have heard people talk a little bit about wondering how much this was actually him versus necessarily someone else. But the way I basically conceptualize this footnote is that he spent decades at this point watching remedies that he made more and more and more dilute. Because remember, he's making his remedies himself, and he was the one who started the dilutions, and he started out by using actual tinctures and stuff of things and just make things more and more dilute over his lifetime. So now he's at the point where he's using 30 Cs, which if you're making remedies by hand is really time consuming and very dilute. And they're working better and better. And how weird is that? Like, to me, of course, after decades of doing this, you would start to get into more of a vitalistic, dynamic view of health and disease and less of a mechanistic one. If you dilute something down 30 times in 100 drops of water every single time and it's working better than if you gave somebody a tablespoon of the actual substance, I think over time you would definitely be I don't know how much mechanical stuff is going on here. I feel like there's something more dynamic, less material, some sort of mystical property inside of the medicine that's getting unlocked somehow. Like to me, it makes sense that his mind would go more to that idea, having done this, after he would have had done this for so many decades. I would also point out, though, that we tend to call things mechanical if we can understand them, right? So the raising of your arm example, I find less effective in this aphorism because there's a really great mechanistic reason why we can raise our arm. The neuron sends a message, and that creates a depolarization of membranes, which creates contraction of the muscles. We can actually make a very mechanistic view of how we raise our arm. But without all of that knowledge, we would not necessarily call it mechanistic. We could call it more dynamic. Same with the tides. We have a more mechanistic view of the moon and the tides these days now that we have a better understanding of them. So, to a certain extent, I feel like if you call something mechanistic, it means you understand it, and so you can call it mechanistic. And if you don't understand it, you have to call it dynamic because you have no idea how it happens. You know that it happens, you know certain things affect it, but you don't know why. And certainly at this point in time, at Hahnemann's point in time, you would not have understood the mechanisms behind disease transmission, and so you might be more tempted to call it dynamic than maybe we would necessarily today. I would say all of that is secondary to the fact that basically he's trying to define what he means by dynamic. Really, I think he's saying it's not mechanical, is his point, and that it's these forces. We can see the effects of forces. Sorry, that probably was really loud on the thing. So we can see the effect of forces on the body, on other things in life, but we don't necessarily see the forces, and that doesn't make them not real. It just means we don't see them and we don't necessarily understand them, but we know that they are there and we can see the effects they have on the material world. Okay. So, just a quick recap. So, in the aphorism itself, we have that we see the vital force by the effects it has on our mechanical body. This does go back a bit to 9 and 10 as well, if you want to review those. And that when you become ill, it is only the vital force that becomes ill, and the vital force is what creates your symptoms. Okay, so the disease doesn't create your symptoms, the vital force does. So if you want to scream and shout at somebody, you can scream and shout at your vital force, because that's what's making you miserable. And then we have the definition of dynamic in the footnote, which is, to me, basically means it's invisible, and we see its effects by the effects, like we can see effects on the physical world, but we can't necessarily see the force, like gravity. We see the effects of gravity, but we cannot see gravity. We can measure gravity because of the effects that it has, but we still do not see or touch gravity. So, yeah, till next time.